the orthoPAC, hosted by Sam Dyer. Welcome to the orthoPAC, where we discuss up-to-date orthopedic topics for the busy clinician. I invite you to sit back and relax as I attempt to fill in the gaps between education, current events, and real-world practice.
Today's listeners, I welcome Tate Heuer. Tate's the Vice President of Federal Advocacy for the AAPA, and I wanted to have him on to discuss some current legislation. So welcome to the podcast, Tate.
Thank you very much. I greatly appreciate you having me on today.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And if you don't mind, could you please just give our listeners a little background about your role with the AAPA and what exactly it is that you do for the AAPA?
Sure. As you mentioned, I'm the Vice President of Federal Advocacy. I oversee AAPA's effort to engage with the federal government. That includes both the legislative and the executive branch, especially involved in the legislative process, and also work closely with my colleagues here at AAPA on the reimbursement team, who do a lot of work with all federal payers of care and private payers of care.
Okay. And let me say thank you for your work that you do. It benefits us all. And I did want to bring you on today to discuss something. I got an email from the AAPA about some legislation. And basically, I didn't know this, but federally employed workers who have on-the-job injuries or workers' comp-related injuries right now, I don't think can really see PAs. And so there's legislation about improving access to workers' compensation for Injured Federal Workers Act, which is a mouthful.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give our listeners a little bit of background, like what is this, what it means, and also maybe talk about the FECA?
Okay, well, I'll kind of frame this a bit and start at it from the federal workers or employees perspective. Federal employees currently receive their health care coverage through the Federal Employees Health Benefits Program. It has included PAs as providers for a long time, and we generally don't hear any issues about PAs providing care to federal employees. However, if a federal employee is injured on the job, then it is covered by the Federal Workers' Comp Program. Your PAs listening may be familiar with providing care to patients who are injured in private sector jobs in the state, where a state workers' comp program pays for their care. However, federal employees are not covered by state workers' comp, and they're covered by the federal workers' comp program. You know, if you're a Forest Service employee or a U.S. postal worker delivering mail, if you're injured on the job, then your federal employees health benefits program coverage will not cover it, and you're covered by the federal workers' comp program. Under federal law, only a physician can oversee care under FECA, and only a physician can certify an injury or disability and that it's work-related. So what the legislation does is seeks to include PAs as providers under FECA. So if you're a postal worker and you hurt your ankle playing basketball, you go see your PA, who's your primary care provider, and nothing goes wrong. But if a dog bites you while you're delivering mail, or you get injured in a mail sorting facility, then at that point, you're covered by the Federal Workers' Comp Program. You cannot see your routine PA for care. If you go to a PA working at a rural health clinic and the PA is the main provider there, then they're going to tell you to go to an emergency room because the federal program won't cover you.
Oh, okay. I did not know that. That's good information for all of our colleagues that are listening, especially in orthopedics, the urgent cares, the emergency departments. Those are all really important things to know. I get primary care as well. So can you give us a little background on how, the AAPA is addressing this, and are there legislators that our listeners should call, or what's going on with the Congress part of it?
We have been working in Congress to build support for including PAs in the Federal Workers' Compensation Program, and also worked with the nurse practitioners for them to be included as well. And we've worked with bipartisan members in both the House and the Senate for legislation called the Improving Access to Workers' Compensation for Injured Federal Workers Act to be introduced. It has been introduced in the Senate by Senator Sherrod Brown, a Democrat from Ohio, and Senator Susan Collins, a Republican from Maine. It's been introduced in the House of Representatives by Representative Tim Walberg from Michigan and Representative Joe Courtney from Connecticut. So we have good bipartisan legislation in both the House and the Senate. In the last Congress, which was last year, the legislation passed committee unanimously and then was adopted 325 to 83 in a vote by the House of Representatives. The legislation was not taken up by the Senate last year, so we're starting new again in this Congress. We obviously are starting in a much better position than what we were last Congress. We have good bipartisan support on both sides. We have the chair and the ranking member of the Committee of Jurisdiction in the House working to find an opportunity to move it. So while Congress may not be considering or passing legislation that often, we are looking at vehicles and opportunities to move this legislation forward.
Great. So what do you think our chances are getting through the current Congress?
Anytime you're looking at something that can pass the House of Representatives 325 to 83, that has really broad, good bipartisan support and is something that's able to move. I think for those who have been watching Congress knows it's been a divided place, a bit polarized, and there has not been a lot of legislation moving through Congress that deals with programs like this. So I feel really good about our support for the legislation. The question is finding something that's moving and having the support there to advance this legislation. So I would urge PAs that hear this to go to our AAPA website. Advocacy Central is a part of it, and we have information on this legislation available there. And we have an easy link where you can write your member of Congress, your 2 senators, and let them know how the legislation is important to you and to federal workers in the area where you live.
Well, let's say that I don't know who my legislators are. How would I find out that information for each state?
In terms of sending a letter or communication to them through our Advocacy Central website, it is really easy. Once you log on, we know your zip code where you are, who your 2 senators are, and who your House member are. And we have a pre-populated letter that can be easily sent. Or if you're anyone just listening to this podcast and you want to know who your representative is, you can go to congress.gov, and there's a feature where you can enter your zip code and learn who your members are.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I think everyone that's listening to this, it behooves you. Basically, I mean, you're losing business, if nothing else. And with the whole push for optimal team practice and advocacy for PAs being able to do things, this is very important legislation. So if you're listening to this and you hear this, please go to the AAPA. Tate, are we missing anything? Is there anything else you'd like to include?
I would just remind everyone listening that AAPA does a lot of advocacy work. We appreciate people being members and supporting our advocacy efforts. I would also encourage everyone, if you're not, to join your state constituent organization, your state chapter of AAPA, and any specialty org that you belong to. Our advocacy work is really important. And if we're not speaking up for PAs and the patients that you all serve, then we're not really being included in federal programs like we should, not having the state laws that we need. And it's just really important for the profession and the patients that you guys provide care to.
Perfect. That's well said. Tate, I appreciate your time today. Thanks for coming on, and we'll get this out soon.
Thank you very much.
Ortho and ND is happening August 21st through the 25th at the JW Marriott in Indianapolis, Indiana. We hope to see you there, and please look at paos.org under CME for details.